The year was 1919, and winter had come to the Blue Ridge Mountains like an executioner, silent and merciless. On the eastern slope of Virginia's highest peaks, where the pines grew so thick a man could walk 20 yards and vanish from the world, there stood a cabin that hadn't heard a woman's voice in 12 years. Silas Hawthorne intended to keep it that way. He stood on the porch that December morning, the same spot he'd occupied every dawn since Abigail died, watching frost creep across the valley below like a disease spreading through healthy tissue. His coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He hadn't noticed. Noticing things required caring, and Silas had stopped caring about anything except keeping himself alive and his traps checked. At 36 years old, he looked like a man carved from the mountain itself. 6'4", shoulders broad as an axe handle, with black hair that touched his collar and a beard that hadn't seen scissors since before the war. A scar ran down his left cheek, a gift from the Germans at Belleau Wood, white against skin darkened by years of sun and wind. His hands were huge, scarred, capable of splitting wood or breaking bone with equal efficiency. He was reaching for his cold coffee when he saw her. A figure on the mountain road, maybe 200 yards down the slope. Walking. No, not walking. Stumbling. Each step a negotiation with gravity. She was barely winning. Silas squinted through the morning mist. Something clutched against her chest, wrapped in what looked like flour sacking. And then he heard it. A sound that cut through the wind and the silence, and 12 years of carefully constructed isolation. A baby, crying. The woman took 3 more steps, then her legs gave out. She crumpled into the snow like a marionette with cut strings, and the crying grew weaker, more desperate, a thin wail that spoke of fever and dying hope. Silas stood frozen. His first instinct was to turn around, walk back inside, close the door. Not my business, not my problem, not my world anymore. The crying continued, getting fainter. And then, against every wall he'd built, against 12 years of choosing numbness over feeling, something cracked in Silas Hawthorne's chest, not his heart. He'd thought that died with Abigail and their son, but something deeper, some bedrock of decency he'd thought the war and grief had burned away. God Almighty. Not again. He was running before he made the conscious decision to move. His boots punched through 2 feet of snow as he charged down the slope, his breath coming in great clouds of steam. The rifle on his shoulder banged against his back. He didn't care. All he saw was that crumpled form, that bundle in her arms, and the snow around them turning pink with blood. He reached her in 90 seconds, dropped to his knees, turned her over. A woman. Young. No, not young, just small. Thin enough that the bones of her face stood out sharp as accusations against whoever had let her get this way. Her lips were blue, her skin the color of candle wax. Her dark hair was matted with snow and frozen sweat, but the bundle in her arms was moving. Thank God. Thank God Almighty. The baby was still alive. Silas shook her shoulder, gently at first, then harder. Her eyelids fluttered. For one moment her eyes opened, gray-blue, the color of storm clouds, and they locked onto his face with an intensity that stopped his breath. Please. Her voice was barely a whisper, words shaped by frozen lips. Don't let her die. Then her eyes rolled back and she went completely limp. Silas didn't hesitate, couldn't hesitate. He scooped the woman up with one arm, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing at all, and tucked the baby bundle inside his coat with his free hand. Then he ran harder than he'd run since France, since bullets were chewing up the earth around him, and the only thing that mattered was reaching the next trench before the machine guns found him. The cabin had never seemed so far away. He burst through his own front door and kicked it shut behind him. The fire in the hearth had burned down to coals, the room cold enough to see his breath. He laid the woman on the table. No, not the table. The bed. His bed. The bed that had been Abigail's, that he hadn't touched in 12 years except to change the sheets once a year whether they needed it or not. He laid her there now. The baby. Focus on the baby first. She was still crying, that thin, desperate sound that any parent knows means something is terribly wrong. Silas unwrapped the flour sack blanket with trembling hands. A little girl, maybe 21 months old. Red gold curls plastered to her head with sweat despite the cold, cheeks flushed with fever. When Silas touched her forehead, heat radiated against his palm like a coal pulled from the fire. "She's burning up." The woman on the bed stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, wild with panic. "Rose." The word came out broken. "Save Rose." "I will." Silas's voice was rust and gravel, rough from 12 years of rarely speaking. "I promise." The woman's hand reached out, found his, gripped with surprising strength. "Save Rose." Then her eyes closed and she was gone again, somewhere between sleep and unconsciousness, where the dying go to wait. Silas stood there for one frozen moment, this massive mountain man with a fevered baby in his arms and a half-dead woman in his bed, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders for the first time since 1907. He moved, built up the fire until the room glowed with heat, fetched the leather pouch from the shelf above the door, the one he'd sworn he'd never touch again. Abigail's herbs, yarrow for fever, elderflower for infection. He'd watched her make the tea 100 times, listened when she explained what each plant could do, never thinking he'd need to know. He knew now. The kettle boiled. He brewed the tea strong enough to taste bitter. The little girl Rose was crying still but weaker now, her small body hot and trembling. Silas lifted her in those huge, scarred hands, hands that had killed men with bayonets and strangled German soldiers in the dark, and he held her with a gentleness that would have surprised anyone who'd served with him in France. "Hush now." His voice cracked. "Hush, little baby. Don't say a word." It was the song he'd sung to his son, the son who'd lived 3 hours, just long enough for Silas to memorize his face before God took him back. The son whose grave was up the hill beside his mother. Rose quieted. Her eyes, blue as summer sky, opened and fixed on Silas's face. She wasn't crying anymore, just looking at him with that complete trust that children have before the world teaches them fear. Silas gave her the tea 1 drop at a time, checked her breathing, wrapped her in clean blankets and laid her on the bed beside her mother. Then he sat in the chair by the door and watched them both in the firelight. This chair he hadn't sat in since Abigail died in that very bed, and he waited to see if they would live or die. He didn't sleep. Silas Hawthorne hadn't slept properly since France, since he'd learned that closing your eyes meant seeing the faces of men you'd killed. Boys, really. German boys who'd died choking on their own blood while calling for their mothers in a language he didn't understand. The woman woke just before dawn. Silas had dozed in the chair, something he hadn't done in years. The sound of movement snapped him alert in an instant, hand reaching for the knife on his belt before his mind caught up. She was trying to sit up. Her eyes were wild, searching, the look of a cornered animal assessing whether to fight or flee. "Easy." Silas stood slowly, keeping his movements small and non-threatening. "Easy now. You're safe." Her eyes locked onto him. He watched her assess, taking in his size, his position, the distance to the door, calculating whether she could make it past him, deciding she couldn't. "Where am I?" Her voice was a rasp, barely audible. "Blue Ridge Mountains, Hawthorne Cabin, about 8 miles from Hollowbrook Town. Rose." The panic sharpened, her whole body tensing. "My daughter, right beside you, sleeping." The woman turned her head so fast Silas thought she'd hurt herself. When she saw the little girl tucked against her side, breathing steady, fever broken, something in her face crumbled. She pulled the child close, pressed her lips to those red gold curls, and Silas looked away to give her the moment. She had a fever. He spoke to the wall, giving her privacy for her tears. "High one. Broke sometime around midnight. You should keep her warm." "How long?" "How long have we been here?" "Most of a day. Sun's about to rise again." He heard her sharp intake of breath. I need to go. Silas turned back to face her. Go where? There's snow 3 feet deep out there and you can barely sit up. I can't. She struggled to swing her legs off the bed, nearly collapsed back against the pillow. I can't stay here. You don't understand. Make me understand. She stared at him, those storm cloud eyes searching his face for something. He didn't know what she was looking for, didn't know if she'd find it. But what she said next changed everything. There are men looking for me. If they find me here, they'll hurt anyone who helped me. What men? It doesn't matter. I just need to leave. In a blizzard, with a sick baby, half dead yourself. Silas crossed his arms. That's not leaving. That's suicide. You don't know. I know you collapsed on a mountain road in the middle of nowhere carrying a child and wearing shoes held together with hope and bad stitching. I know you haven't eaten properly in weeks, maybe months, and I know that whatever you're running from, dying in a snowdrift won't solve it. The woman's jaw tightened. For a moment he thought she'd argue. Then her shoulders sagged and she looked down at her sleeping daughter. Her name's Rose. Her voice went quiet. She's almost 2. And I'm Kate. Kate Brennan, Silas Hawthorne. This is my place. Why? Kate's voice turned hard, suspicious. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Silas considered the question. Considered telling her about Abigail, about the 12 years of silence, about the fact that he'd stopped helping anyone because helping meant caring, and caring meant losing. You needed help. That's enough. The storm raged for 3 days. Silas moved into the workshop behind the cabin, giving Kate and Rose the room with the fireplace. He told himself it was practical. The woman needed rest. The child needed quiet. He told himself it had nothing to do with the memories that room held. On the second day, Kate was up and moving. Silas came in from checking his traps to find her scrubbing his stove with a fury that suggested she was cleaning away more than grease. Don't have to do that. Kate didn't look up. I don't take charity, Mr. Hawthorne. My mother was from Ireland. She taught me one thing above all else. Irish women don't accept handouts. We earn our way. She straightened and turned to face him. Silas saw her properly for the first time. In daylight, with color back in her cheeks, she was striking. Not beautiful in the way Abigail had been, but there was something in her face. Strength, fire, the kind of determination that doesn't come from having an easy life. It comes from surviving a hard one. I can cook. I can clean. I can mend and sew. She lifted her chin. I can work for my keep. You're in no condition. I'm in plenty of condition. Kate's eyes flashed. And I won't be a burden. Before Silas could respond, Rose toddled over. The fever had broken completely now. She looked up at Silas with those big blue eyes and smiled. Then she wrapped her small hand around one of his fingers. Silas froze. Completely. Utterly. Frozen. She likes you. Kate's voice had softened. Children know things adults forget. They know when someone's good, even if that someone's forgotten it themselves. That night, Silas stood at the window of his workshop and looked at the cabin. Light glowed in the kitchen window. He could hear, faint but unmistakable, the sound of Kate singing to Rose, a lullaby in a language he didn't recognize, probably Irish, like her mother. It was the first music the cabin had heard in 12 years. Something shifted in Silas's chest. Not his heart. Surely not his heart. That had been buried 12 years ago. But something. Some small seed of something that felt, God help him, almost like hope. He didn't trust it. Hope was for people who hadn't lost everything yet. Hope was for people who didn't know that the universe was random and cruel and took away everything you loved without reason or mercy. But he didn't crush it either. Not tonight. On the third day, everything changed. There was a knock at the cabin door just after sunset. Silas answered it to find Ezekiel Dalton standing on his porch, snow covering his hat and shoulders. Zeke was 61 years old, rail-thin, with a gray beard and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He was the only person Silas would call a friend, though even that was stretching the definition. They saw each other maybe once a month when Zeke came by to buy Silas's furs for resale in Roanoke. Silas. Zeke's voice was grave. We got trouble. What kind? The kind with questions. Zeke stomped snow off his boots. Man came into Hollowbrook yesterday, Deputy Cole Vance. He's asking about a woman. Dark-haired, traveling with a baby. Says she's wanted for debt. Silas's whole body went still. Wanted by who? Luther Grimm. The name hit Silas like a fist. Everyone in 3 counties knew Luther Grimm. Owned the trading post in Hollowbrook. Owned the boarding house. Owned the company store where the miners bought their supplies on credit they'd never pay off. Grimm collected debts the way some men collected stamps. With obsession. With cruelty. What's Grimm want with her? Zeke glanced past Silas into the cabin. Says she owes $400. Says her late husband left the debt. Says he's got a legal claim. Silas heard Kate's sharp intake of breath behind him. He didn't turn. Kept his eyes on Zeke. That true? Kate's voice came from behind him. Steady. Stronger than he'd expected. My husband Patrick died in the mine. He owed $50. I worked to pay it off. Then Grimm said it was $200, then $3, then $4. He kept adding interest, adding fees, adding anything he could think of. She stepped forward so Zeke could see her. The truth is, I don't owe Luther Grimm a single cent. But he doesn't care about truth. He cares about owning people. And when I wouldn't let him own me, he decided to destroy me instead. Zeke looked at Kate for a long moment. Then he looked at Silas. You keeping her here? She's my cook. Silas heard the lie come out smooth as glass. Hired her last week. Room and board, $40 a month. Legal employment. Does Vance know she's here? Not yet. Zeke adjusted his hat. But he's asking around. And Grimm's got 3-4 men working for him besides Vance. They'll cover ground fast once they know where to look. Then I'll be ready when they come. Silas. Zeke's voice held a warning. Grimm's got the law in his pocket. You can't fight that. Watch me. After Zeke left, Kate turned to Silas. You don't have to do this. I'll leave before I bring trouble to your door. Too late for that. Silas walked to the rifle above the fireplace, took it down, checked the action, loaded it with practiced efficiency. Mr. Hawthorne. Silas. Kate blinked. What? My name. If we're going to fight this together, you should use it. Together? Her voice was barely a whisper. Silas looked at her. Really looked. This woman who'd walked through a blizzard with a dying baby rather than submit. This woman who'd scrubbed his floor to pay a debt she didn't owe. This woman whose daughter had grabbed his finger and smiled like she'd known him her whole life. Lady, I spent 12 years hiding from everything. From life. From pain. From anything that might make me feel. He set the rifle down. I'm done hiding. Kate's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you risk everything for someone you just met? Silas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he'd thought long dead. Because my wife used to say this cabin needed the sound of a child's laughter, and I'd forgotten what that was like. Until you. He turned away before she could respond, looked out the window at the snow-covered mountains, at the darkening sky, at the world that had taken everything from him once and might try again. But this time, Silas Hawthorne wasn't alone, and God help anyone who tried to take what was his to protect. The confrontation came 3 days later, just after dawn when the mist still clung to the valley like smoke from a dying fire. Silas was splitting wood behind the cabin when he heard the horses. 3 of them, coming up the mountain road at a pace that said their riders weren't concerned about being friendly. He set down the axe, walked around front, and picked up the rifle he'd left leaning against the porch rail. Kate appeared in the doorway, Rose on her hip. She'd heard them too. Inside. Silas didn't look at her. Keep the door barred. I'm not hiding. Kate. His voice held an edge she hadn't heard before. "This is my property, my fight. You stay inside with Rose until I say different." For a moment he thought she'd argue. Then she nodded and stepped back, closing the door. But Silas knew she'd be watching through the window, knew she wouldn't run even if things went bad. That was the kind of woman Kate Brennan was, the kind who stood her ground. The riders came into view. Deputy Cole Vance in front, a big man with a cruel face and a badge that gave him permission to use it. Two others behind him, hired muscle by the look of them. Rough types who got paid to ask questions with their fists. Vance reined in his horse 20 feet from the porch, close enough to talk, far enough to draw and shoot if it came to that. "Hawthorne." Vance's voice carried the false friendliness of a man who enjoyed his authority. "Been a while, not long enough. Now that's not neighborly." Vance smiled without warmth. "I'm here on official business. Looking for someone. Woman named Kate Brennan. Dark hair, traveling with a baby girl. You seen anyone like that?" Silas rested the rifle across his arm. Casual. Easy. Like they were discussing the weather. Might have. What she wanted for? Debt. $400 owed to Luther Grimm. Man's got a legal claim. Got papers and everything. Legal claim requires a warrant. You got a warrant, deputy? Vance's smile thinned. Don't need a warrant for debt collection. Just need cooperation from good citizens. You always were a good citizen, Hawthorne. War hero and all. The war was 6 years ago. This is now. One of the hired men spoke up, his voice rough. We know she's here. Someone saw smoke from this cabin. You ain't had visitors in 12 years. Now suddenly you do. That's interesting timing. Silas shifted his stance slightly. To anyone watching, it would look like he was getting comfortable. But Vance had been a deputy long enough to recognize a man preparing for violence. The rifle, still casual, was now pointed in their general direction. Not aimed exactly, but close enough. I hired a cook. Silas's voice was flat. Legal employment. Woman showed up looking for work. I offered her room and board plus $40 a month. That's between me and her. Not your business. Grimm says she owes him money. That makes it my business. Grimm can take it up with the courts. He wants his money, he can sue. But he's not coming on my property without a proper warrant signed by a judge. This is Virginia, deputy, not Grimm's personal kingdom. There was a long silence. Vance's hand drifted toward his hip. The two hired men shifted in their saddles. Silas didn't move, didn't need to. The rifle said everything that needed saying. Then the cabin door opened. Kate stepped out onto the porch, Rose still on her hip. Every man turned to look at her. Silas wanted to tell her to get back inside, but he knew it wouldn't matter. She'd made her choice. I'm Kate Brennan. Her voice carried clear across the yard. And I don't owe Luther Grimm anything. My husband Patrick paid his debt before he died. $50 paid in full. I have witnesses. Grimm's got a ledger says different. Grimm's ledger is a lie. Kate's voice hardened. He does this. Finds women whose husbands died. Claims they owe money. Forces them to work at his boarding house to pay off debts that don't exist. I'm not the first. I won't be the last unless someone stops him. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. Vance's voice dripped false concern. You got proof? I've got 9 other women who'll testify. Women he's done the same thing to. One of them got away 7 years ago. Her name is Iris O'Malley. She knows where Grimm keeps his real books, the ones that show what he's really doing. Vance's expression flickered, just for a moment, but it was enough. He knew about Iris, which meant Grimm had talked about her, which meant Kate was telling the truth. Well, Vance straightened in his saddle. That's all very interesting. But I still got a job to do. Grimm filed a legal complaint. I need to bring Mrs. Brennan in for questioning. No. Silas's voice cut like ice. You need to bring a warrant. A real one. Signed by a federal judge, not one of Grimm's bought politicians. Until then, Mrs. Brennan is under my protection as my employee. Anyone tries to take her off this property without proper authority, they'll answer to me. You threatening an officer of the law? I'm informing an officer of the law of the legal requirements for entering private property and seizing a citizen. You don't like it? Go talk to Marshal Barrett in Roanoke. Get him to sign your warrant. Until then, you're trespassing." The standoff lasted maybe 30 seconds. Felt like 30 minutes. Vance and his men on one side, Silas with his rifle on the other, Kate standing on the porch with Rose, the morning sun catching the gold in her daughter's hair. Finally, Vance turned his horse. "We'll be back, with proper papers." "You do that. And deputy, bring the marshal with you. I don't trust local law worth a damn anymore." After they were gone, Kate came down off the porch. She was shaking. "I shouldn't have come out. I made it worse." "No." Silas lowered the rifle. "You made it real. Now Vance knows we're not backing down. And more importantly, he knows we know about Iris. You think he'll tell Grim?" "Guaranteed. Which means we need to find Iris before Grim does. If she's the only witness who can prove what he's doing, she's in danger." Kate looked down at Rose, who was playing with her mother's hair, oblivious to the tension. "Where is she?" Last anyone heard, Coal Ridge, mining town about 40 miles west over the Kentucky line. That's 2 days' travel. Kate met Silas's eyes. "We should go. Now. Before Grim can send someone ahead of us." Silas nodded slowly. "Pack light. We leave in an hour." They set out while the morning dew still clung to the grass. Silas on his big bay gelding, Kate riding behind him with Rose bundled between them. The trail over the mountains was narrow and treacherous, barely wide enough for a horse in places. One wrong step and they'd tumble 200 feet down into the ravine. But Silas knew these mountains like some men knew their own faces in the mirror. He'd hunted every ridge, trapped every hollow, walked every game trail between Virginia and Kentucky. The war might have taken pieces of him, but it had given him something too. The ability to move through hostile territory, to read terrain, to see danger before it saw him. They rode in silence for the first hour. Rose dozed, lulled by the rhythm of the horse. Kate held her daughter close, but Silas could feel her tension. She was waiting for something, expecting trouble. She didn't have to wait long. The gunshot came from a stand of pines 50 yards upslope. The bullet whined past Silas's head close enough to feel the air move. He reacted instantly, yanking the reins and driving the horse down slope toward cover. Kate gasped, but held on, protecting Rose with her body. They made it behind a boulder as the second shot hit. Rock chips sprayed. Rose started crying. "Stay down!" Silas slid off the horse, pulling his rifle. "How many you see?" "I saw muzzle flash. 2 positions." Kate's voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "They're flanking us." Silas scanned the tree line. "There." A shadow moving through the pines. And there, 30 yards to the left. Another one. Professional positioning. These weren't random bandits. They'd been waiting. Grim's men? Has to be. The third shot came from a different angle, trying to pin them down while someone circled around. Silas had seen this tactic in France. The Germans used it when they wanted prisoners instead of bodies, which meant these men had orders to take Kate alive. That made them predictable. Silas sighted carefully, waited for the shadow on the left to move again. When it did, he squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked and echoed across the valley. The shadow went down. The other man broke cover, running. Silas tracked him, fired again. The man stumbled, grabbed his shoulder, kept running, disappeared over the ridge. Silas waited, counting heartbeats, listening. Nothing. No more movement. No more shots. He moved up the slope carefully, found the first man lying in the pine needles, clutching his shoulder where Silas's bullet had torn through muscle. Not dead. Silas hadn't aimed to kill. He never did unless there was no other choice. "Who sent you?" The man spat blood. "Grim. Said bring the woman back. Dead or alive, he gets paid either way." "How many more?" "Just us 2. Was supposed to be easy. Scare you off, grab the woman." The man laughed, bitter. "Didn't know we was dealing with a damn war hero." Silas took the man's weapons, his horse, left him his canteen and a blanket. You got maybe 6 hours before you bleed out. I were you, I'd start walking toward Hollowbrook. Tell Grim what happened here. Tell him next time I won't aim for the shoulder." When he got back, Kate was checking Rose for injuries. The little girl had stopped crying, more startled than hurt. "They okay?" "We're fine." Kate looked at him. "Did you kill them?" "One's wounded. Other ran. They'll report back to Grim." "Good. Let them. Let him know we're not running scared." They rode on. The encounter had changed something, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't just about debt or money or legal technicalities. Grim was willing to kill, which meant he was desperate, which meant whatever Kate knew or represented was more dangerous to him than Silas had realized. Around noon they stopped by a creek to water the horse and rest. Rose toddled around, picking up rocks and showing them to Kate with the serious concentration of a child who thinks every stone might be treasure. Silas watched them. Kate was patient, praising each rock like it was a diamond, making her daughter feel valued, making her feel safe despite everything. "You're good with her." Silas didn't usually make small talk, but something about the moment called for words. "She's all I have." Kate glanced at him. "After Patrick died, I had nothing. No money, no family, no prospects. Just Rose, and the determination that she'd have a better life than I did." "What was your life like? Before?" Kate was quiet for a moment. "Hard. My mother came from Ireland during the famine as a child. Never talked much about it, but I know it was bad. She married my father, a coal miner. He was kind, but the mine killed him when I was 12. After that, it was just me and my mother. She taught me to sew, to cook, to survive. She died when I was 16. I met Patrick a year later." She looked down at Rose. "We had 3 good years before the mine took him too. Seems like the mine takes a lot of men. That's what mines do. They take and take until there's nothing left to give." Kate's voice hardened. "And men like Grim, they feed on the wreckage. They wait for tragedy, and then they swoop in like vultures." "Tell me about Iris O'Malley." Silas refilled his canteen. "What happened to her?" Kate picked up Rose, held her close. "Iris was 17 when her father died in a mine collapse. Her mother was sick, couldn't work. Iris went to Grim for help. He offered her a job at the boarding house. Room and board, he said. Good wages. She was desperate, so she said yes. And he trapped her. First month, room and board cost more than her wages, so she owed him. Second month, same thing. He kept adding charges. Laundry, food, interest. By the end of the first year, she owed $300. By year 7, it was over 1,000. She was a slave in everything but name. How'd she get out? Kate's expression went dark. Her mother died. Suddenly there was nothing Grim could threaten her with anymore. No leverage. So one night she just walked out, took nothing but the clothes on her back, disappeared into the mountains. And Grim let her go? Grim couldn't find her. Iris knew these mountains as well as you do. She hid, changed her name, started over in Coal Ridge where nobody knew her history. But she knows things. About Grim, about how he operates. She knows everything. Kate met Silas's eyes. She told me before I ran, told me Grim keeps a ledger, a black leather book. It has the names of every woman he's trapped. The real debts, not the made-up ones. The judges he's paid off. Everything. If we can get that book, we can destroy him. Where's he keep it? In the safe in his office, above the trading post. Iris said he counts his money there every Friday night until 10. After that, he goes home. So we break in after 10. Kate blinked. That's a crime. So is what he's doing. Difference is we'll have proof. He'll just have lies. They rode the rest of the day in thoughtful silence. By sunset they were descending into Coal Ridge, a mining town clinging to the side of a mountain like a barnacle to a ship's hull. Gray houses, gray streets, gray people who'd breathed coal dust so long they'd forgotten what clean air tasted like. They found Iris O'Malley in a cabin on the edge of town. She answered the door with a shotgun in her hands and fear in her eyes. When she saw Kate, the fear turned to recognition, then something close to hope. "Kate, Lord above, they said you were dead." "Not yet." Kate gestured to Silas. "This is Silas Hawthorne. He's helping me. We need to talk." Inside, Iris's home was sparse but clean. She was 39 but looked older, worn down by years of abuse and fear. When Kate explained what they wanted, why they'd come, Iris went pale. "You can't. If Grim finds out I talked to you, he'll kill me. He'll kill more women if we don't stop him." Kate's voice was steel. "How many more, Iris? How many more girls like you were? Like I was?" Iris's hands shook. She set down her coffee cup before it spilled. 30. Maybe more. He's been doing this for 15 years. Some escape like I did. Most don't. They work until they die or until they're too old to be useful. Then he throws them out with nothing. The Black Ledger. Is it still in his safe? Far as I know. Iris closed her eyes. The combination is 110389. November 3rd, 1889. The day he opened the trading post. He told me once when he was drunk. Said it was his lucky day. We need one more thing. Silas spoke for the first time since they'd entered. "We need you to talk to the marshal. Federal Marshal Joseph Barrett in Roanoke. Tell him what Grim did. Give him a reason to investigate." "I can't." Iris's voice broke. "I've built a life here. I have friends, a job. If I come forward, if I testify, everyone will know what I was, what he made me. They already know what you are." Kate's voice softened. "You're a survivor. You're brave. And you're the only one who can help stop him from doing to others what he did to you." Iris wept. Deep, racking sobs that spoke of years of shame and fear finally being released. Kate held her, rocked her, let her cry. When it was over, Iris looked up with red eyes but a set jaw. "Okay, I'll talk to Barrett. But you need to get that ledger. Without it, it's just my word against Grim's. And he's got money and lawyers. We'll get it." Silas stood, one way or another. They left Coal Ridge at first light. The ride back took longer because Silas kept them off the main trail, moving through the backcountry where Grim's men were less likely to find them. By the time they reached the cabin, it was late afternoon of the second day. Zeke was waiting on the porch. "About time you got back." He stood, his old bones creaking. "We got news. Good and bad. Give me the bad first." Silas dismounted, helped Kate and Rose down. "Grim's hired 5 more men, hard types from Richmond. Word is he's planning to come up here himself. Going to make an example out of you. And the good news? Marshal Barrett's in Hollowbrook. Came in yesterday asking questions. Seems someone sent him a telegraph about Grim. He's interested but says he needs evidence." Silas looked at Kate. "Friday night. 2 days from now. That's when we move." Kate nodded. She'd known this was coming. Known they'd have to risk everything. But knowing and doing were different things. That night, after Rose was asleep, Kate found Silas in his workshop. He was carving something from a piece of oak. His hands, so large and rough, moved with surprising delicacy. "What are you making?" "A bird. For Rose." Silas didn't look up. Every child should have a toy. Kate watched him work, saw the concentration, the care. This man who'd been alone for 12 years, who'd shut himself off from everything, was carving a toy for her daughter. "Thank you. For everything. For saving us. For fighting for us." Now Silas looked up. His eyes in the lamplight were the color of storm clouds. Like Kate's. Like 2 people who'd seen darkness and come through. "You saved me too. Maybe you don't see it yet, but you did. I was dying up here. Slowly. Quietly. Just fading away. Then you showed up and reminded me what it felt like to have something worth protecting." Kate felt tears sting her eyes. "What if we fail? What if Grim wins?" "Then we'll have tried. That's more than most people can say." Silas returned to his carving. "Besides, I didn't survive France just to let some small-town tyrant beat me. Grim's about to learn what happens when you threaten a man's family. Family. The word hung in the air between them. Not quite true yet, but not quite false either. Something in between. Something growing. Friday came too fast. The days between their return from Coal Ridge and Friday night passed with the strange slow speed of time when you're waiting for something inevitable, something dangerous. Silas spent the hours preparing, checking weapons, mapping routes through Hollowbrook in his mind, planning for every possibility. Kate spent them learning how to load a rifle, how to move quietly through brush, how to read the mountain signs that Silas saw without thinking, the way broken twigs pointed in the direction of travel, the way disturbed earth told you how long ago someone had passed. Skills she'd never needed in her old life but understood she might need in this new one. Rose, oblivious to the tension, played with the wooden bird Silas had finished carving. She carried it everywhere, making it fly through the air while humming wordless songs. On Thursday evening, Marshal Joseph Barrett arrived at the cabin. He rode up alone, a man in his middle 50s with a gray mustache and the kind of eyes that had seen too much corruption to be surprised by it anymore. His federal badge caught the late sun, gleaming silver against his vest. Silas met him on the porch. The rifle stayed inside this time. If Barrett meant trouble, a badge wouldn't stop him. If he meant help, the rifle wasn't needed. Marshal, Mr. Hawthorne. Barrett dismounted with the careful movements of a man whose back had taken too many hard trails. I had an interesting conversation with a woman named Iris O'Malley. She tells quite a story about Luther Grimm. She tell the truth? That's what I need to determine. Barrett tied his horse to the rail. Stories are easy, evidence is hard. You got evidence, Mr. Hawthorne? Will tomorrow night. Silas kept his voice neutral. Mrs. Brennan and I are going to get you a ledger. Black leather. Contains the real records of Grimm's operation. Names, amounts, dates, everything you need. That would be breaking and entering. Barrett's expression didn't change. I can't be party to a crime. Then you weren't here when I told you about it. Silas met the marshal's eyes. You were in Hollowbrook asking questions. Happened to be near the trading post around 10:30 when you heard a disturbance. Investigated as part of your duty. Found us with evidence of a larger crime. That's the story. Barrett was quiet for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. You learned that kind of thinking in France? Learned a lot of things in France. Most of them I'd rather forget. This, though, this feels like the kind of thing I should remember. All right. Barrett's voice dropped. I'll be at the hotel. If I happen to see or hear anything suspicious Friday night, I'll investigate. But Mr. Hawthorne, one thing. What's that? If Grimm catches you in his office, he's within his rights to shoot you. Self-defense on his own property. You understand that? I do. And you're going anyway. Silas glanced back at the cabin. Through the window he could see Kate reading to Rose by lamplight. A scene of such simple domestic peace it hurt to look at. Hurt because he'd forgotten such things existed. Hurt because he'd remembered how much he needed them. Yeah, I'm going anyway. After Barrett left, Kate came out onto the porch. She'd put Rose to bed and now stood in the doorway with her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. He'll help us, if we get the ledger. Until then, we're on our own. Kate nodded. She'd expected that. Hoped for more, but expected this. Are you scared? Terrified. Silas's honesty surprised even himself. Been a long time since I cared enough about something to be scared of losing it. Kate moved closer, stood beside him looking out at the mountains that were slowly disappearing into dusk. What changed? You. Rose. This. He gestured vaguely at the cabin, the life they'd built in barely 2 weeks. For 12 years I was a ghost, just going through the motions. Then you showed up half dead in the snow, and suddenly I had a reason to be alive again. Scared the hell out of me. Kate reached out, took his hand, the first time she'd initiated contact. Her fingers were small and cold in his. I'm scared too. Not of dying. I've been close enough to death that it doesn't frighten me anymore. I'm scared of failing, of Rose growing up the way I did, of Grim winning. He won't win. Silas squeezed her hand gently. Men like Grim, they think money and power make them untouchable. But they're wrong. They're only untouchable until someone touches them. Then they crumble like everyone else. You sound certain. I am. Because I've killed better men than Luther Grim, killed them in France when they were trying to kill me, and they had machine guns and artillery and poison gas. Grim's got money and a few hired thugs. That doesn't scare me. Not anymore. They stood in silence as full darkness fell. Behind them, through the cabin window, the lamp burned warm and yellow. In front of them, the mountains rose black against a sky full of stars. Somewhere out there, Luther Grim was planning, scheming, thinking he'd won. He hadn't won yet. Friday morning dawned cold and clear. Perfect weather for what they had to do. Silas and Kate left the cabin just after sunrise, leaving Rose with Zeke, who'd agreed to watch the child despite his grumbling about being too old for nursemaid work. The old man had surprised them by producing a pistol from his coat, small but serviceable. You get in trouble, you fire 3 shots fast. I'll hear them. I'll come. Silas took the pistol, checked the loads, handed it to Kate. You know how to use this? Point and squeeze. Don't aim, just point like you're pointing your finger. The gun will do the rest. Kate slipped it into her coat pocket. The weight of it was foreign, frightening, but also somehow reassuring. She wasn't helpless anymore, wasn't just running and hiding. She had teeth now, could bite back. They reached Hollowbrook by mid-morning. The town was larger than it had seemed from a distance. Maybe 300 souls, built around the trading post and the mine entrance that gaped in the hillside like a mouth waiting to swallow men whole. Grim's trading post dominated the main street, 3 stories of whitewashed wood, with the store on the ground floor and offices above. Behind it, connected by a covered walkway, was the boarding house where Grim kept his captive women. Silas and Kate didn't approach. Not yet. Instead, they circled the town, staying to the edges, watching, learning the patterns. Who came and went? Where the deputy spent his time. How many of Grim's men were visible? They counted 6, plus Deputy Vance, plus Grim himself. 8 men total. Bad odds for a frontal assault. Good thing they weren't planning one. They spent the afternoon in the woods above town, watching the sun crawl across the sky with agonizing slowness. Kate dozed fitfully, her head on Silas's shoulder. He stayed awake, alert, remembering another time he'd waited like this, in a shell crater in France with German machine guns chattering in the darkness, waiting for the order to go over the top. He'd been scared then too. But he'd gone anyway, because the men beside him were counting on him, because there was no choice but forward. Same as now. At 9 o'clock they moved into position. The back of the trading post faced an alley that ran between buildings. A wooden staircase led up to the 2nd floor where Grim's office was. There was a window. Silas had watched it all day, seen the lamp lit at 8, seen Grim's shadow moving behind the glass. 10:15. That's when we go, not before. Silas checked his rifle one more time. He'll be counting money until 10. Needs 15 minutes to put it away, lock everything up. That's when he's distracted. That's our window. What if he's still there? Then we wait. Or we improvise. Silas looked at her. You don't have to come up. You can stay down here. Keep watch. No. Kate's voice was firm. This is my fight as much as yours, maybe more. I'm going. At 10:12 they moved. The staircase was old and every step creaked. But the wind had picked up, rattling shutters and covering small sounds. They reached the landing. The door was locked. Silas had expected that. He pulled a thin piece of metal from his pocket, something he'd fashioned from a barrel hoop, slid it into the gap between door and frame, worked it gently until he felt the latch give. The door swung open silent on well-oiled hinges. Inside, Grim's office was neat to the point of obsession. Desk with papers arranged in perfect stacks, filing cabinets along one wall, a painting of a mountain scene, And behind the painting, if Iris had told the truth, the safe. Kate moved to the painting while Silas kept watch at the door. She lifted it off carefully. Behind was a black iron safe with a combination dial. Her hands shook as she turned it. 110389. The safe opened with a soft click that sounded loud as a gunshot in the quiet room. Inside was money. Stacks of bills bound with string, and beneath the money, a book. Black leather, just like Iris had said. Kate pulled it out with trembling fingers. The ledger. She opened it, saw names written in neat script. Sarah Collins, Mary Johnson, Margaret White. Women she'd known at the boarding house. Women who'd disappeared over the years. And the numbers beside their names. Real debts. $20, $30, $50. And then the inflated amounts. 200, 500, 1,000. Pages and pages of theft, of lives stolen and sold. Got it. Kate's voice was barely a whisper. Then they heard the footsteps. Heavy boots on the stairs outside. Moving fast. Multiple people. They'd been spotted, or someone had talked, or Grimm had set a trap. Didn't matter which. What mattered was they were about to have company. Window. Silas moved fast, grabbed Kate's arm, pulled her toward the window that looked out over the alley. But the door burst open before they could reach it. Luther Grimm stood in the doorway. 50 years old, well-fed, wearing a vest that probably cost more than most miners made in a year. In his hand was a pistol, small but deadly at this range. Behind him, Deputy Vance and 2 more men crowded into the room. Well, Grimm's voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of a man who'd never done a day of hard labor in his life. Mrs. Brennan, Mr. Hawthorne, I was wondering when you'd make your move. Kate clutched the ledger to her chest. Silas stepped in front of her. His rifle was useless at this range. Too long, too slow. Grimm could shoot them both before he could bring it to bear. Clever of you to get Iris to talk. Grimm smiled without warmth. I always knew that woman was a loose end. Should have dealt with her years ago. But I got soft, sentimental. Won't make that mistake again. You won't get the chance. Silas's voice was granite. Marshal Barrett's in town. He knows we're here. You shoot us, he'll hear it. Come running. Barrett. Grimm laughed. That old fool? He's at the hotel, 3 blocks away. By the time he gets here, you'll both be dead, and this will be a tragic case of burglary gone wrong. I was defending my property. Self-defense. Perfectly legal. He raised the pistol, pointed it at Kate. The book, Mrs. Brennan. Toss it here. Kate didn't move. Behind Silas, she could feel her heart hammering, could feel the weight of the pistol in her pocket, the one Zeke had given her. Point and squeeze. Don't aim. Grimm's finger tightened on the trigger, and then 3 things happened at once. Kate pulled the pistol from her pocket and fired. The shot went wild, smashing the lamp on Grimm's desk. The room plunged into darkness, lit only by the burning oil spreading across the wood. Silas moved, lunged forward, slammed into Grimm with the force of a bear taking down prey. They crashed to the floor. The pistol flew from Grimm's hand, skittering across the boards, and from the street below came a shout. "Federal Marshal, hold your positions!" Barrett. He'd been closer than Grimm thought. Or he'd been waiting, listening, ready to move. The fight was brief and brutal. Grimm tried to reach his pistol. Silas broke his arm. The crack was audible even over the growing fire. Grimm screamed. Deputy Vance pulled his weapon, but Kate, moving on pure instinct, kicked it from his hand. The deputy looked at her in shock. This thin woman, who was supposed to be a victim, had just disarmed him. Marshal Barrett burst through the door with 2 more deputies behind him. Federal deputies who answered to law, not money. Everyone on the ground, now! Grimm was already down, clutching his broken arm. Vance dropped to his knees. The other 2 men ran. Got maybe 5 steps before Barrett's deputies tackled them in the hallway. Silas stood slowly, helped Kate to her feet. The fire was spreading, but Barrett was already organizing men with buckets. They'd contain it, save the building. But Grimm's office would be gutted. Didn't matter. They had what they needed. Kate held up the ledger. Soot-stained but intact. Marshall. Evidence. 34 women. 15 years of fraud and forced labor. All documented. Barrett took the book with gloved hands, flipped through pages. His face grew harder with each name he read. Luther Grimm. He turned to the man on the floor. You're under arrest for fraud, extortion, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. Federal charges. You'll be tried in Roanoke. Grimm spat blood. You can't prove anything. That book could be fake. Could have been planted. Could have been. Barrett smiled cold. Except we're going to talk to every woman in that book. Get their testimony. Cross-reference with your bank records. By the time we're done, Mr. Grimm, you won't see daylight again until you're an old man. They dragged Grimm away. Vance, too. The fire was out by midnight, the trading post damaged but standing. In the wreckage of the office, Silas and Kate stood with Marshall Barrett as he catalogued evidence. You two did a dangerous thing tonight. Barrett looked at them. Illegal thing. We got you what you needed. Silas met his eyes. That's what matters. Still, could have gone bad. Could have gotten you both killed. But it didn't. Kate's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. And now 34 women get justice. That's worth the risk. Barrett was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. I'll need you both to testify. Federal trial. Probably 3-4 months from now. You willing? We'll be there. Silas put his hand on Kate's shoulder. Whatever it takes to make this stick. They left Hollowbrook as dawn broke over the mountains. Rose was awake when they got back to the cabin, playing with Zeke, who'd told her stories all night to keep her from worrying about her mother. Mama! Rose ran to Kate, wrapped herself around her mother's legs. Kate scooped her up, held her close, breathed in the smell of her daughter's hair. They'd done it. Actually done it. Gotten the evidence. Survived the night. Won. But as she looked at Silas over Rose's head, Kate knew this was only the beginning. The trial was months away. Grimm had lawyers, money, connections. The fight wasn't over. It was just starting. Silas seemed to read her thoughts. He moved close, put his arms around both Kate and Rose, held them like they were the most precious things in the world. We'll get through it. His voice was quiet, certain, together. Kate leaned into him. Let herself, just for a moment, feel safe, feel protected, feel like maybe, just maybe, they'd found something worth keeping. Together. She whispered the word, felt it settle into her bones like a promise. Outside, the sun climbed over the Blue Ridge Mountains. A new day, a new beginning. And somewhere in a jail cell in Hollowbrook, Luther Grimm sat with his broken arm and his shattered empire and knew that he'd finally met someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated or broken. He'd met Silas Hawthorne, and the woman Silas had chosen to protect. That had been his first mistake. It would be his last. 3 weeks passed before the telegram arrived. 3 weeks of waiting, of watching the road for trouble that didn't come, of Kate jumping at every sound while Rose played oblivious to the tension that filled the cabin like smoke. Silas spent the days teaching Kate to shoot properly, not just point and pray like Zeke had taught her, but really shoot. How to breathe, how to hold steady, how to squeeze instead of pull. By the end of the 2nd week, she could hit a tin can at 50 yards. Not perfect, but good enough. Good enough to survive. The telegram came on a gray Tuesday morning, delivered by a boy from Hollowbrook who rode his mule up the mountain and handed it to Silas with wide eyes before scurrying back down like the devil was chasing him. Silas read it twice, then handed it to Kate. Trial set for February 14th. Roanoke Federal Court. Your presence required. Marshall Barrett. Valentine's Day. Kate's laugh was bitter. How fitting. The day we try to kill Grimm's empire. Not try. Will. Silas folded the telegram, put it in his pocket. Barrett's been busy. Says here he's got 11 women willing to testify. Plus Iris. Plus you. That's 13 voices against Grimm's lies. Grimm's got lawyers, expensive ones, and we've got truth." Silas met her eyes. "Truth's free, but it's worth more than all his money." The days until the trial moved like honey in winter. Slow, thick, heavy with anticipation. Kate practiced her testimony with Silas, going over every detail of her time in Grimm's boarding house. Every false charge, every threat, every moment of degradation designed to break her spirit. Silas listened without judgment, asked questions that sharpened her memory, made notes in his careful, unpracticed handwriting. He'd learned to write in the Army but never had much call for it since. Now he filled pages with dates and amounts and names, building a case as methodically as he'd once built fortifications in France. On the first Friday of February, Marshal Barrett came to the cabin again. This time he brought news that made Silas's blood run cold. "Grimm's out." "Out?" Kate's face went pale. "Out of jail?" "Posted bail. $2,000. Judge Morrison signed the release." Barrett's voice was tight with anger. "Same judge who's been in Grimm's pocket for years. I tried to argue federal flight risk, but Morrison wouldn't hear it." "Where is he now?" Silas's hand moved to his rifle without thinking. "Back in Hollowbrook, at the boarding house. And he's brought more men, 7 or 8 by my count. Hard types from Richmond. The kind who don't ask questions, just take money and follow orders. He's going to run." Kate stood abruptly. "Before the trial. He'll disappear and we'll never see justice. Or he'll come here." Silas's voice was flat. "Try to eliminate the witnesses before they can testify. That's what I'm afraid of." Barrett pulled out his pistol, checked the loads, holstered it again. "I can't stay here. Got 3 other witnesses to check on. But Mr. Hawthorne, you need to be ready." "I'm always ready." After Barrett left, Silas did something he hadn't done in 12 years. He went to the workshop and opened the trunk in the corner, the one he'd locked the day he came home from France and swore he'd never open again. Inside were the tools of his old trade. His service rifle, cleaned and oiled but unused since 1918, his bayonet, his trench knife, and wrapped in oilcloth, his medals. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, certificates with words like valor and heroism that meant nothing when you couldn't save the one person who mattered. Kate found him there an hour later, sitting on the floor surrounded by memories of a war he'd tried to forget. "I didn't know you kept these. Didn't want to remember." Silas picked up the rifle, checked the action. Still smooth after all these years. But I guess some things you can't forget no matter how hard you try. "Were you good at it?" "The war? I was alive at the end. That made me better than most." He set down the rifle. "Kate, if Grimm comes here, it won't be pretty. Won't be noble or clean like stories make it sound. It'll be ugly, brutal. And I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If it goes bad, if they get past me, you take Rose and you run. Don't stop, don't look back, don't try to help me. Just run and don't stop running until you find Barrett or the federal authorities." Kate knelt beside him, put her hand over his. "I'm not leaving you." "Kate." "No." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I've run enough. From Patrick's death, from Grimm, from everything that scared me. I'm done running. If they come, we face them together, just like we've faced everything else." Silas looked at her. Really looked, saw the woman who'd walked through a blizzard with a dying baby, who'd stood up to Grimm in his own office, who'd learned to shoot in 3 weeks what most men took years to master, saw strength he'd almost missed because he'd been looking for the wrong kind. All right, together. They fortified the cabin, moved furniture to block windows, stacked firewood as barriers, laid out weapons and ammunition where they could be reached quickly. Silas set up fields of fire, marking angles and distances in his mind, planning for every approach, every possibility. On the night of February 10th, 4 days before the trial, they came. Silas woke to a sound that didn't belong. Not loud, just wrong. The kind of wrong that combat soldiers learn to recognize. The sound of men trying to be quiet and failing. He was up and armed in seconds. Kate woke when he moved, her hand reaching for the pistol she now kept beside the bed. How many? Her whisper was calm. Too calm. She was scared but refusing to show it. Can't tell. At least 4. Silas moved to the window, peered through a gap in the boards, saw shadows moving in the tree line. Professional spacing. These weren't drunk miners. These were Grimm's Richmond men. Hired killers who'd done this before. They surrounded. 1 shadow at each corner of the cabin, a 5th at the front door, a 6th at the back. Coordinated. Military almost. Someone had trained them or they'd learned the hard way. The voice that called out was cultured, educated. Luther Grimm himself. Mr. Hawthorne, I know you're awake. I know you can hear me. I'm offering you a choice. Send out Mrs. Brennan and the child, and you walk away from this. Keep them, and you die with them. Kate moved beside Silas. Her face in the moonlight was pale but determined. Rose slept on, wrapped in blankets, innocent and unaware. What do we do? Kate's voice was barely audible. We fight. Silas checked his rifle. Or, we die trying. Either way, they're not taking you. Grimm's voice came again. I'll give you 1 minute to decide. After that, my men come in. They're professionals, Mr. Hawthorne. War veterans like yourself. You might kill 1 or 2, but you can't kill them all. And when you're dead, I'll take Mrs. Brennan anyway. So why die for nothing? Silas moved to the window, called out loud enough to be heard. You want to know why, Grimm? I'll tell you. Because some things are worth dying for. Because standing up to men like you is what separates people from animals. Because even if I lose, even if you win tonight, you'll know you had to kill a better man than you'll ever be to do it. Silence. Then Grimm's laugh, bitter and cold, poetic, wasted on the dead. You have 40 seconds. Silas turned to Kate. Wake Rose. Get her to the root cellar under the kitchen. It's got a tunnel. Leads 50 yards into the woods. Dug it myself in case of fire. You go through, you run, you don't stop. I told you I'm not leaving, and I'm telling you to protect your daughter. Silas's voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. Rose needs you alive more than I need you here. Now go. That's not a request. Kate stared at him, saw the immovable mountain in his eyes, knew he was right even though every fiber of her being screamed to stay. She grabbed Rose, wrapping the still sleeping child in blankets. If you die, I'll never forgive you. Tears streaked her face. If I die, I'll be with Abigail. We'll both watch over you. Now go. She went. Disappeared into the kitchen. Silas heard the cellar door open. Close. Heard the scrape of the tunnel entrance. Then nothing. He was alone. 20 seconds. Silas moved through the cabin like a ghost, checking positions, making sure every weapon was loaded and ready. The rifle, 2 pistols, the trench knife, the bayonet. 10 seconds. He thought of Abigail, of their son, of the life he'd lost 12 years ago. Thought of Kate and Rose, of the life he'd found again. Thought that maybe, just maybe, getting 12 more years was more than a broken man like him deserved. 5 seconds. Time's up, Mr. Hawthorne. Grimm's voice held satisfaction. Gentlemen, bring him out. Dead or alive, I don't much care. The assault came from 3 directions at once. Front door, back door, window on the west side. Coordinated. Professional. Exactly what Silas expected. The first man through the front door caught a bullet in the chest, dropped like a stone. The second dove aside as Silas fired again, the shot taking out the doorframe instead of flesh. The back door exploded inward. 2 men rushed through. Silas spun, fired once, hit one. The other got close enough that the rifle was useless. Silas dropped it, pulled his trench knife. The close quarters fighting training from France kicked in like he'd never left the trenches. The man was good, fast, strong. He got a knife of his own out. They circled in the confined space, 2 predators testing each other. He lunged. Silas parried, countered. His blade found flesh. Not deep, but enough to hurt. The man grunted, backed off, tried again. This time Silas was ready, caught the man's wrist, twisted. The snap of bone was audible. The man screamed. Silas's knife found his throat. 3 down. The window shattered. A man came through in a shower of glass, fired twice. Both shots went wide in the darkness. Silas dropped, rolled, came up firing. His pistol barked 3 times. The man at the window crumpled. 4 down. But Silas was bleeding, felt it hot on his side where flying glass had caught him. Not deep, not yet, but enough to slow him, enough to matter. How many left? The answer came in the form of gunfire from outside, concentrated, deliberate. They were shooting out the walls, turning the cabin into a sieve, wood splintered, glass shattered. Silas hit the floor as bullets chewed through the space where he'd been standing. This was it. They'd pin him down, wait for him to run out of ammunition, then storm the place. He might take 1 or 2 more with him, but the math was simple. He was one man. They were many. Numbers always won in the end. Then he heard it. From the direction of town. Hoofbeats, many of them, coming fast. The gunfire stopped. Silas heard confused shouting from outside. Grimm's voice raised in anger. Then another voice, one he recognized. "Federal Marshal, throw down your weapons. You're surrounded." Barrett. The old lawman had come, and he hadn't come alone. The next few minutes were chaos. Grimm's men tried to scatter. Some got away. Most didn't. Federal deputies on horseback rode them down or shot them off their feet. Professional killers they might be, but they weren't soldiers. Weren't used to fighting men as good as they were. Silas stayed down. Let it play out. His side hurt. His ears rang from the gunfire in the enclosed space. He was getting too old for this. 40 years ago he could have fought all night. Now 30 minutes left him shaking. The cabin door opened slowly. Marshal Barrett stepped in. Gun drawn. Saw Silas on the floor. "You hit?" "Grazed." Silas got to his feet slowly. "Kate and Rose?" "Safe. Found them coming out of your tunnel half a mile down the mountain. Smart thinking with that escape route. Grimm? Got him. And 5 of his men. 2 dead. 3 wounded. Rest ran." Barrett holstered his weapon, looked around at the destroyed cabin, the bodies, the blood. "But, you did good, Hawthorne. Held them off long enough. Didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You chose to stand. That means something." They walked outside. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the snow pink and gold. Kate saw him and ran, wrapped herself around him despite the blood, despite the death, just held him like she'd never let go. Rose, awake now, reached for him. Silas took her with his good arm, felt her small body warm and alive and safe against his chest. "I thought I told you to run." His voice was gentle. "I did." Kate's voice was muffled against his shoulder. "For exactly 50 yards. Then I stopped, waited. If you died, I was coming back to kill Grimm myself. Despite everything. Despite the pain and the exhaustion and the 4 dead men in his cabin." Silas laughed. It felt strange, foreign, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. "You're stubborn. I learned from the best." They loaded Grimm into a wagon, hands shackled, face bruised where one of Barrett's deputies had gotten enthusiastic with an arrest. He looked at Silas with hate that would never die. "This isn't over. You hear me, Hawthorne? I've got lawyers. I've got money. I'll get out." "No." Barrett climbed onto the wagon seat. "You won't. Because now you're not just facing fraud charges. You're facing attempted murder of federal witnesses, conspiracy to commit murder, and 4 counts of felony murder for the men who died attacking Mr. Hawthorne's property. Add it up, Grimm. You're looking at hanging." Grimm's face went white, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He'd overplayed his hand. Let desperation make him stupid. Now he'd pay for it with his life. The wagon rolled away toward Roanoke, toward justice, toward the end of Luther Grimm's empire. Silas stood with Kate and Rose and watched it go. When it disappeared around the bend, Kate spoke quietly. "Is it really over?" The fighting part is, now comes the hard part. What's that? Living. Building something worth keeping. Raising your daughter. Making a life instead of just surviving day to day. Kate looked up at him. And you think we can do that? After everything? I think we already started. Silas kissed the top of Rose's head. The little girl had fallen back asleep, safe and warm in his arms. I think we started the day you fell in the snow, and I decided not to close my door. The sun climbed higher. The blood would be cleaned up. The cabin would be repaired. The trial would come and go and Grimm would hang. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the woman beside him, the child in his arms, the life they'd fought for and won. Everything else was just details. The Roanoke Federal Courthouse was the largest building Kate had ever seen. 3 stories of limestone and granite, with columns that rose like the trunks of ancient trees. It was meant to intimidate, to remind ordinary people that the law was bigger than they were, more powerful, more permanent. It worked. Kate felt small walking up those steps, but Silas was beside her, and behind them came the others. Iris O'Malley, wearing her best dress and holding her head high despite the fear in her eyes. Mary Johnson, 33 years old with gray in her hair from 7 years of servitude. Sarah Collins, 41, who'd escaped in 1916 and never thought she'd be brave enough to come back. Emma Davis, 29, rescued from the boarding house just 3 weeks ago. 11 women total, each carrying the weight of their own story, each ready to speak truth to power. The trial began on Valentine's Day, 1920, under Judge Amanda Hartwell. 57 years old with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of lie a man could tell. She'd been appointed by President Wilson himself, one of the first female federal judges in the country. If Luther Grimm thought he could charm or intimidate her, he was about to learn different. The prosecution was led by a federal attorney named Thomas Whitmore. Young, maybe 30, with the burning righteousness of a man who believed the law could actually deliver justice. He'd spent weeks preparing, reading depositions, interviewing witnesses, building a case so airtight that not even Grimm's expensive lawyers could find the cracks. Grimm sat at the defense table looking smaller than he had in Hollowbrook. The beating from the arrest had left his face mottled with bruises. His arm was still in a sling where Silas had broken it. He wore an expensive suit, but it couldn't hide what he was. A predator stripped of power. A wolf with broken teeth. His lawyer was everything Grimm was not. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair and a voice like honey over gravel. Preston Bennett from Richmond. The kind of lawyer who defended railroad barons and tobacco kings. The kind who won cases not through truth but through doubt. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of the packed courtroom. The Honorable Judge Amanda Hartwell presiding. They rose. The judge entered, took her seat behind the bench and looked out over the courtroom with eyes that missed nothing. Be seated. We have much to cover, and I will tolerate no disruptions. Mr. Whitmore, you may begin. The prosecution's opening statement was surgical. Whitmore laid out the case piece by piece. The ledger, the false debts, the pattern spanning 15 years, 34 women, over $18,000 in fraudulent claims. He spoke for 20 minutes without notes, each fact landing like a hammer blow. Then it was Bennett's turn. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense attorney's voice was smooth, reasonable, the kind of voice that made you want to believe. You've heard a compelling narrative from the prosecution, but that's all it is, a narrative, a story. And stories can be shaped, twisted, made to fit a predetermined conclusion. He walked toward the jury box, made eye contact with each man. There were no women on the jury. Virginia law didn't allow it yet. My client, Mr. Luther Grimm, is a successful businessman. He runs a trading post that serves 3 counties, a boarding house that provides shelter for those in need. He extends credit to minors and their families. Yes, he expects to be repaid. That's not a crime. That's commerce. Bennett paused. Let the words sink in. What we have here is a tragic misunderstanding. Women who genuinely owed money, convinced by agitators that their debts were somehow illegitimate. Mr. Grimm's ledgers show every transaction, every debt incurred, every payment made or not made. He's done nothing wrong except the crime of being successful in a poor region, and for that, he's been attacked, beaten, and now sits before you falsely accused. Kate felt rage building in her chest. It was all lies, smooth, polished lies wrapped in legal language, but lies nonetheless. The first witness was Iris O'Malley. She walked to the stand on shaking legs, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down and looked at Whitmore with eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Mrs. O'Malley, tell the court how you came to work for Luther Grimm." Iris's voice was soft at first, grew stronger as she spoke. "My father died in a mine collapse in 1909. I was 17. My mother was sick, couldn't work. We had nothing. Mr. Grimm came to me, said he could give me a job, room and board plus wages. It seemed like salvation. And was it? No, sir. It was the opposite. First month I worked, he charged me $30 for room and board, paid me $20, said I owed him $10. Second month, same thing. By the end of the first year, I owed him $300 and couldn't leave until it was paid." Objection. Bennett stood. "Hearsay. We have no documentation of these alleged charges." Overruled. Judge Hartwell looked at Bennett over her spectacles. "The witness is testifying to her personal experience. Continue, Mrs. O'Malley." Iris nodded. "I worked for Mr. Grimm for 7 years, never earned enough to pay off the debt. He kept adding charges, interest, fees for things I never bought. By the time I escaped, he claimed I owed over $1,000. "And how did you escape?" "My mother died. Suddenly there was nothing left he could threaten me with. So one night I just walked out. Took nothing but my clothes. I've been hiding ever since. Afraid he'd find me. Afraid he'd drag me back." "Mrs. O'Malley." Whitmore held up the black ledger. "Have you seen this before?" "Yes, sir. That's Mr. Grimm's private ledger. He kept it in his safe. I saw it once when he was drunk. It has the real numbers, what people actually owed versus what he claimed they owed." Bennett's cross-examination was brutal. He attacked Iris's memory, suggested she was lying for attention, implied she was a spurned woman angry that Grimm hadn't shown her romantic interest. Every word was designed to destroy her credibility. But Iris held firm, answered each question with quiet dignity, never raised her voice, never lost her composure. By the time Bennett sat down, frustrated, Iris had won, not through eloquence but through simple, unshakable truth. The next witness was Kate. She walked to the stand feeling like every eye in the courthouse was judging her choices, her poverty, the fact that she'd been desperate enough to work for a man like Grimm in the first place. Silas sat in the front row. His eyes found hers, held them, gave her strength she didn't know she needed. "Mrs. Brennan, tell us about your husband." Kate spoke clearly, forced herself not to rush. "Patrick Brennan. He died in the mine collapse of October 1918, left me with $50 in debt to the company store. I worked to pay it off, 3 months of sewing and mending. By January 1919, I'd earned enough to settle the debt. And then Mr. Grimm came to me. Said Patrick had owed more than I knew, said the real debt was $200, showed me papers with numbers I couldn't verify. I had no money, no family, a daughter barely old enough to walk. So I agreed to work at his boarding house until the debt was paid." "How long did that arrangement last?" 3 months. By April, the debt had grown to $400. Mr. Grimm said interest was accumulating, said I'd never pay it off at the rate I was working. Then he made a different proposal." "What proposal?" Kate's hands clenched. "He came to my room one night. Said the debt could disappear if I became his wife, that he'd take care of me and Rose, that I should be grateful for his generosity." "And your response?" "I refused. The next day he tripled the debt to $1,200. Said I'd work for him the rest of my life or face debtor's prison. That's when I knew I had to run. You ran in a blizzard, with a sick baby. Whitmore's voice was gentle. That must have been a desperate decision. I was desperate. Rose had a fever, no medicine, no help. I knew if we stayed, we'd both die. If we ran, maybe we'd die faster, but at least we'd die free. The courtroom was silent. Even Bennett seemed at a loss for words. Mrs. Brennan, Whitmore held up a document. This is the ledger entry for your debt. It shows $50 originally, then $200, then $400, then $1,200, all within 6 months. Does this match your recollection? Yes, sir. Exactly. Bennett's cross-examination was vicious. He suggested Kate had been a willing participant in an affair with Grimm, that she'd run when she got pregnant by another man and blamed Grimm to cover her shame, that Rose might not even be Patrick Brennan's child. Kate's face burned, but she didn't break, didn't let him shake her story, because it was truth, and truth, she'd learned, was stronger than lies no matter how well packaged. Is it true, Mrs. Brennan, that you're now living with Mr. Silas Hawthorne? Yes. Unmarried? Yes. And he's been supporting you and your daughter? He employed me as his cook. I earn my wage. But you're romantically involved with him, are you not? Kate met Bennett's eyes. I'm grateful to Mr. Hawthorne. He saved my life and my daughter's life. If that gratitude has grown into something more, that's between him and me. It has nothing to do with Luther Grimm's crimes. Bennett smiled. Doesn't it? Isn't it possible you're testifying not because Mr. Grimm wronged you, but because you want to please your new benefactor? Before Kate could answer, Silas stood. Every head turned. Judge Hartwell raised an eyebrow. Mr. Hawthorne, you're not a witness at this moment. Sit down. Your Honor, I apologize, but I won't sit here while this man implies that Mrs. Brennan is lying to please me. Silas's voice carried through the courtroom. I found her dying in the snow. I gave her work because she earned it. And whatever feelings exist between us grew from respect, not obligation. If Bennett wants to impugn someone's character, he can start with mine. Leave her alone. The judge considered, then nodded. Mr. Bennett, move along. You've made your point. But the damage was done. Not to Kate. To Bennett. The jury had seen a man attack a widow and mother, seen another man stand up for her honor. They were mountain men, most of them. They understood honor, understood standing up for the defenseless. The prosecution called 7 more women over the next 2 days. Each told similar stories. False debts, impossible charges, years of servitude. The pattern was undeniable. Then came the surprise witness. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Judge Morrison. A gasp went through the courtroom. Judge Morrison was the local magistrate who'd signed Grimm's bail, who'd legitimized his false debt claims for years. What was he doing testifying for the prosecution? Morrison took the stand looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in a month. His hands shook as he swore the oath. Judge Morrison, Whitmore's voice was cold. Have you accepted money from Luther Grimm? A long pause. Then, quietly, yes. How much? Over the years, approximately $5,000. And in exchange for this money, what did you provide? I signed documents, debt judgments, arrest warrants when women tried to leave Grimm's employment. I legitimized his operation with the power of my office. Why are you testifying today? Morrison looked at Grimm, at the man who'd owned him for years. Because I'm dying. Cancer. 6 months, maybe. And I won't meet my Maker with these sins on my soul. What Grimm did was evil. What I did was worse. I knew, and I helped anyway. For money. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hartwell banged her gavel. Order. Order, or I'll clear this room. Bennett tried to salvage his case, called character witnesses, businessmen who'd worked with Grimm, ministers who'd seen him at church, miners who'd gotten credit at his store and paid it back honestly. But it wasn't enough. The Black Ledger was Exhibit 1, 34 names, $18,000 in fraud. Impossible to explain away. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman was an old man with a beard like Moses. He stood when asked for the verdict. On the charge of fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of extortion? Guilty. On the charge of false imprisonment? Guilty. 47 counts total. Guilty on every single one. Judge Hartwell looked at Grimm with contempt. Mr. Grimm, you have used the law as a weapon against the vulnerable. You have perverted justice for profit. You have destroyed lives with calculated cruelty. She paused. The sentences will run consecutively. 30 years in federal prison. Additionally, all assets are to be liquidated and distributed to your victims as restitution. 30 years. Grimm would be 77 when he got out. If he lived that long. His empire was gone, his wealth seized. His name would be synonymous with cruelty for generations. As they led him away in chains, he looked at Kate one last time. The hate in his eyes was pure, undiluted, but also impotent. He had no power left, no ability to harm her. Kate stared back, didn't flinch, didn't look away. Let him see that she'd won. That truth had won. That all his money and lawyers and threats had come to nothing in the end. Outside the courthouse, 11 women stood together on the steps. Survivors, victors. The sun was setting over Roanoke, painting the sky orange and gold. What happens now? Sarah Collins looked at the others. Where do we go? Iris spoke up, her voice stronger than Kate had ever heard it. We go home, but not to hide anymore. We tell our stories. We help other women. We make sure this never happens again. Kate felt Silas's hand on her shoulder, felt Rose's weight in her arms, looked at these women who'd found courage in each other's company. We start something, a shelter maybe, a place where women like us can go when they're running, when they need help, somewhere safe. Who would run it? Mary asked. We would, all of us. Kate looked at Iris. You know how it works, what women need when they're escaping. I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. Together we could make something that matters. The women looked at each other, saw possibility, saw purpose, saw a way to turn their suffering into something meaningful. Mountain Haven. Iris said the name like a prayer. We'll call it Mountain Haven. And just like that, from the ashes of Luther Grimm's evil, something good was born. The ride back to Hollowbrook took 2 days. Kate and Silas traveled in silence mostly. Rose chattered, pointing at birds and trees and clouds shaped like animals, innocent of the weight her mother and Silas carried. On the second night they camped under stars so bright they looked like spilled diamonds. Rose slept between them, wrapped in blankets. Safe, warm, free. Kate lay awake, staring at the sky. Silas lay beside her, close enough to touch but not touching, respecting boundaries even now. Silas? Her voice was soft. Thank you. For everything. Nothing to thank me for. I did what anyone would do. No. You did what you chose to do. You could have closed your door. Could have let me freeze. Could have handed me over to Vance that first time he came. But you didn't. You fought for me when you didn't have to. Had to. Silas's voice was rough. Couldn't do anything else. You reminded me that I was still alive, still capable of feeling something other than empty. Kate rolled toward him, reached out, took his hand. Rose is asleep. We're alone, and I want you to know something. What? I love you. It's probably too soon to say it, probably not what you want to hear, but it's true. I love you for your strength and your honor, and the way you carved a bird for my daughter when you thought no one was watching. Silas was quiet for so long Kate thought maybe she'd made a mistake, said too much too fast. Then he spoke. I loved my wife, thought I'd never love anyone else, thought that part of me died with her." He squeezed Kate's hand. "But you showed me that love doesn't replace love. It adds to it. Abigail will always be in my heart. But there's room for you, too. Been room for a while now. Just took me time to see it." Kate felt tears slip down her cheeks. "What do we do now?" "Now?" Silas pulled her close. "Now we go home. We rebuild the cabin. We start that shelter for women. We raise Rose. We live the life we fought for. Together? Together." Above them the stars wheeled in their ancient dance. Below them the mountains slept, dark and eternal, and between them a little girl dreamed innocent dreams, unaware that she was loved by two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen light. The trial was over. Justice had been served, but the real story, the important one, was just beginning. The story of what came after. Spring came to the Blue Ridge Mountains the way it always did. Slowly at first, then all at once. Ice melted into rushing streams. Snow retreated up the slopes. Green things pushed through dead leaves, determined to live despite the winter that had tried to kill them. Kate stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching Silas and young Tommy Chen rebuild the west wall. Tommy had come to them 3 months ago, just after the trial. Marshal Barrett had brought the 17-year-old orphan up the mountain, saying the boy needed purpose and Silas needed help. Tommy's parents had died in a mine collapse when he was 15. He'd been living rough in Hollow Brook ever since, doing odd jobs, sleeping in barns. When Silas asked if he could hold a hammer, Tommy's eyes had lit up. His father had been a carpenter before the mine took him. Silas had nodded once, said, "You can stay," and that was that. Now Tommy lived in the workshop, learning the trade, becoming the son Silas had lost, and the apprentice he'd never expected to have. The wall that Grimm's men had shot full of holes. They worked in silence mostly, the way men do when the work itself is the conversation. Hammer, saw, nail. Each sound a word in a language Kate was learning to understand. Rose played in the yard, chasing a butterfly that didn't want to be caught. She was 2.5 now, growing like a weed, her vocabulary expanding daily. Just yesterday she'd called Silas Papa for the first time. He'd stopped mid-swing with his hammer, looked at Kate with eyes full of wonder and terror in equal measure, then gone back to work without saying a word. But Kate had seen his hand shake, seen him wipe his eyes when he thought no one was looking. "Mrs. Hawthorne." Tommy's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "How's this look?" Kate walked over, examined the frame he'd built. Straight. True. Strong enough to hold for another 100 years. Perfect. She smiled at the boy. Young man, really. 17 now. Silas had taken him in after the trial, taught him carpentry, given him purpose when he'd had none. "You're getting good at this. Mr. Hawthorne's a good teacher." Tommy glanced at Silas, who was fitting boards with the precision of a surgeon. "Doesn't talk much, but when he does, you remember it. That's the truth." Kate returned to the doorway, watching, remembering. It had been 2 months since the trial, 2 months since Grimm's conviction, 2 months of slowly rebuilding not just the cabin but their lives. The rhythm of it was strange. After so much running and fighting and fear, ordinary life felt almost surreal. Cooking, cleaning, mending clothes, small tasks that had once seemed like drudgery now felt like privileges. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted her thoughts. 2 riders coming up the mountain road. Kate's hand moved automatically to the rifle beside the door. Old habits died hard, but Silas had already straightened, had recognized the riders before Kate did. Zeke. And beside him, a woman Kate didn't know. Older, maybe 70, with the weathered face of someone who'd lived hard and survived it. Silas set down his hammer, walked to meet them. Kate followed, bringing Rose, who protested at having her butterfly hunt interrupted. The old woman dismounted with surprising grace for her age, looked at Silas with eyes that were sharp as broken glass. "You're Hawthorne, the mountain man who brought down Luther Grimm." Her voice was rough. Smoke and whiskey rough. Just a man who did what needed doing. Silas kept his distance, polite but wary. "Who are you?" "Mary Blackfeather. I testified at the trial." The woman extended her hand. "Cherokee. Been living in these mountains 72 years. Longer than your people been here, I reckon." Silas shook her hand. "What brings you up the mountain, Mrs. Blackfeather?" "Call me Mary. Everybody does." The old woman looked past him at Kate. "And I came because of what you said on the courthouse steps, about starting something for women who need help." "Mountain Haven." Kate stepped forward with Rose on her hip. "We're planning to use Grimm's old boarding house. The court awarded it to us, to all the survivors. That's good land." Mary nodded approval. "But you'll need more than land. You'll need knowledge. How to help women who've been broken. How to put them back together. How to teach them to be strong again. You know these things?" Kate studied the old woman, saw strength, saw wisdom earned through suffering. "My mother was taken by white men when she was 14, kept as a slave for 10 years before she escaped. She taught me what women need when they're healing from that kind of harm. I've been helping women for 50 years, mostly Cherokee. But suffering don't see color. Pain is pain. Will you help us?" Kate felt hope rising. "We need someone who knows what they're doing. We're just women who survived. We don't know how to help others do the same. That's why you'll succeed." Mary's smile was fierce. "The best healers are the ones who've been wounded. You know the path because you walked it. I'll teach you what I know. But you'll teach me too. We'll learn from each other. When can you start?" "Already started." Mary gestured to her horse where bags were tied behind the saddle. "Brought my things. Figure I can stay in the boarding house. Help you get it ready. First, women will need a clean place. Safe place. Somewhere that don't smell like the man who hurt them." Kate felt tears sting her eyes, held out her hand. "Welcome to Mountain Haven, Mary." The old woman took her hand, held it firm, then looked at Silas. "You're marrying this woman?" "Planning to. Once things settle." Silas glanced at Kate. "If she'll have me, she'll have you." Mary's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "Blind man could see the way she looks at you. Don't wait too long, though. Life's short. Love's shorter. You find something worth keeping, you hold on to it." Over the next 3 weeks, they transformed Grimm's boarding house, scrubbed every floor until the smell of him was gone, painted walls, replaced mattresses, turned the room where Kate had been imprisoned into a bright kitchen with windows that let in light, turned Grimm's office into a common room where women could gather, talk, heal together. The first woman came on a Tuesday in late April. Her name was Helen Porter, 28 years old. Her husband had died in a mining accident and she'd been living rough for 6 months, afraid to go to the company store for help because she knew how that ended. Mary met her at the door, led her inside, gave her hot soup and bread, a clean bed, asked nothing in return, just offered safety. By the end of May, they had 6 women. By June, 11. Word spread through the mountains. There was a place now, a refuge, run by women who understood, who didn't judge, who helped without strings attached. Kate managed the kitchen. Iris handled the accounts. Mary taught healing, both of the body and the spirit. They worked from dawn until dark and fell into bed exhausted every night. But it was good exhaustion, the kind that came from purpose, from meaning. Silas visited every few days, brought supplies, fixed things that broke. Never stayed long, but always long enough that Kate knew he was checking on her, making sure she was safe, that she was happy. On a warm evening in early June, he found her alone on the porch of Mountain Haven. The other women were inside preparing dinner. The sound of their laughter drifted through open windows, a sound that would have been impossible 4 months ago. "You look tired." Silas sat beside her. The porch creaked under his weight. "Good tired." Kate leaned against him. "The kind of tired that means something. We helped a woman today. Rebecca. Her husband beat her for 7 years. She finally got the courage to leave. walked 12 miles through the mountains to get here. When Mary opened the door, Rebecca just collapsed, sobbed for an hour, then she looked up and said thank you. Like we'd given her the world instead of just a bed and a meal. You gave her hope. That's worth more than the world. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains gold and orange. Rose was with Zeke again, had basically adopted the old man as her grandfather. He pretended to be annoyed, but Kate had caught him carving toys for the girl, a whole menagerie of wooden animals that Rose treasured like jewels. Kate. Silas's voice was hesitant, unusual for him. I've been thinking. Dangerous. Kate smiled. About us. About Rose. About what comes next. Kate's heart began to beat faster. What about it? Silas pulled something from his pocket. A ring. Not gold, not silver. Carved from wood. The same wood he'd used to make Rose's bird. Intricate, beautiful, unique. I made this. Took me 2 months. He turned it in his fingers. It's not much, not like a proper ring from a store, but I carved it from a tree Abigail planted. Thought maybe that was right. Her blessing on something new. Kate couldn't speak, could only look at the ring. At this massive mountain man who'd killed men in France but carved birds for children. Who'd been dead inside for 12 years until a half-frozen woman reminded him how to feel. Kate Brennan. Silas's voice was rough. Will you marry me? Will you let me be a father to Rose and any other children we might have? Will you build a life with me that honors what we've survived and looks forward to what we might become? Kate took the ring, slipped it on her finger. Perfect fit, like it had been made for her, because it had been. Every curve, every detail, made with hands that knew how to destroy but chose to create. Yes. Her voice broke. Yes to all of it. Yes to you and me and Rose and whatever comes next. Yes to morning coffee and fixing broken things and growing old on that mountain. Yes. Silas kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper. The kiss of a man who'd thought he'd never kiss anyone again, who'd forgotten what it felt like to hold someone and be held in return. When they broke apart, Kate was crying. Happy tears this time, not the tears of fear or pain that had been her companion for so long. Tears of joy, of completion, of coming home to a place she'd never been but had always been searching for. When? Silas asked. When what? When do we get married? Kate laughed. Whenever you want. Tomorrow. Next week. Next year. I'm not going anywhere. Tomorrow's too soon. Need to tell Rose. Need to tell Zeke and the others. Silas thought for a moment. How about July? Give people time to come. Make it proper. July's perfect. They married on the 4th of July, 1920. Independence Day felt appropriate. Both of them had won their freedom. From the past. From pain. From the prisons they'd built, or been forced into. The ceremony was held outside the cabin, the same spot where Kate had collapsed in the snow 7 months before, where this whole impossible story had begun. Reverend Crawford officiated. He'd ridden up from Hollowbrook with half the town following. Zeke served as best man, grumbling about having to wear a suit, but secretly pleased. Iris was Kate's maid of honor. Rose was flower girl again, taking her job with the utmost seriousness. The women from Mountain Haven came, all 16 of them now, survivors who'd found the courage to show up, to celebrate love after surviving hate. Mary Blackfeather sat in the front row. Beside her, Marshall Barrett, who'd become an unlikely friend. Behind them, Tommy and dozens of others, miners, farmers, mountain folk who'd heard about the man who'd fought Luther Grimm and the woman who'd survived him. Kate wore a simple dress. White, but not fancy. She'd made it herself. Silas wore his suit, the one he'd last worn to Abigail's funeral. He'd aired it out, mended the tears, wore it now to start something new instead of end something old. The vows were traditional, but when Silas spoke them, his voice cracked. When Kate promised to love him, tears streaked her face. Rose watched everything with big eyes, understanding that something important was happening even if she didn't understand exactly what. "I pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Crawford smiled. "Mr. Hawthorne, you may kiss your bride." Silas kissed Kate. The crowd cheered. Rose clapped. And somewhere in the mountains, an eagle called, high and wild and free. The celebration lasted until sunset, food and music and laughter. Zeke played his fiddle. Tommy danced with half the girls from town. Even Silas danced, awkward and self-conscious but smiling. Actually smiling, something Kate had rarely seen. As the party wound down and people started the journey back to Hollowbrook, Kate and Silas stood together watching them go. Rose had fallen asleep in Silas's arms, worn out from excitement and cake. "Hard to believe this is real." Kate leaned against her husband. "7 months ago I was dying in the snow. Now I'm married. Have a home. Have purpose. Have everything I thought I'd never have. It's real." Silas adjusted Rose in his arms. The child's weight was comfortable now. Natural. All of it's real. And it's ours. No one can take it away. But Kate knew that wasn't quite true. Life could take things away. She'd learned that with Patrick. Silas had learned it with Abigail. Death and loss were always waiting, always patient. But so was life. So was love. So was the choice to keep going, to keep building, to keep choosing hope even when despair seemed easier. 5 years passed. Years of work and growth and challenges. Mountain Haven expanded. Bought the building next door. Then the one next to that. By 1925 they were housing 40 women at a time, teaching them skills, helping them find work, giving them the tools to build independent lives. Kate managed it all with Iris and Mary, 3 women who'd survived hell and decided to make sure others didn't have to. They'd helped 89 women total. 89 lives changed. Saved, maybe, or at least given a chance. The cabin grew too. Silas added rooms, 2 more bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a workshop where he taught carpentry to anyone who wanted to learn. Tommy had become a master craftsman, had his own business in town now, came back every week though, to visit, to learn, to thank the man who'd given him purpose. By 1925, Rose was 6 years old, smart as a whip, learning to read from Kate, learning the mountains from Silas. She'd started asking questions about her father, about Patrick. Kate told her the truth, that Patrick had been a good man who'd died too young, that Silas wasn't her father by blood but was her papa by choice, that both men loved her in different ways. Rose seemed satisfied with that, asked if she could have a brother or sister someday. That fall, Kate realized she was pregnant again. A son, born in the cabin on a cold January night in 1926. They named him Ethan, for Silas's father, a man who'd taught his son to work with wood, to build instead of destroy. Silas held his son with the same wonder he'd held Rose that first night, this tiny, fragile life that depended on him completely. He was 43 now, gray in his beard, lines around his eyes, but holding Ethan made him feel young again, made him feel like maybe he'd been given a second chance at everything. Kate watched from the bed, exhausted but happy, saw the man who'd been dead inside for 12 years, who was now more alive than most people ever managed. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm the luckiest man in these mountains, maybe the luckiest man in the world." "Not luck." Kate smiled. "Choice. You chose to open your door, chose to fight, chose to love again. That's not luck. That's courage." In 1927, they visited Abigail's grave, something they did every year, this time with Rose and Ethan, teaching the children about the woman who'd come before, making sure she wasn't forgotten. Silas knelt by the headstone, placed flowers, spoke quietly. "Abigail, I want you to meet someone. This is Kate, my wife, and Rose, and Ethan, our children." He paused. I haven't forgotten you. Never will. But I've learned that loving them doesn't dishonor you. It honors the life you wanted me to have, the life you told me to find again before you died." Kate knelt beside him, spoke to a woman she'd never met but felt connected to anyway. "Thank you for loving him, for teaching him that home matters, that family matters. I'll take care of him now, I promise." Rose placed flowers. Ethan, only a year old, babbled happily, understanding nothing but feeling the solemnity of the moment. They walked back to the cabin together. A family. Imperfect, but real. Built from loss and survival and the stubborn refusal to give up. The years continued. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman. Smart. Strong. Determined to be a doctor. To help people the way Mountain Haven had helped her mother. She left for medical school in 1935. Came home for holidays. Always came home. Ethan grew tall like his father. Learned carpentry. Learned the mountains. Took over the workshop when Silas's hands started to shake. Age catching up with the warrior. A daughter came in 1928. Ruth, named for Kate's mother. Then a son in 1930. Samuel, named for no one. Just a name they liked. The cabin filled with life, with noise, with the chaos and joy of children. Mountain Haven kept growing. Mary Blackfeather passed in 1942 at 94. Died in her sleep after teaching one last woman how to make healing tea. Iris took over her role, taught what Mary had taught her, the knowledge passing from one generation to the next. By 1950, Mountain Haven had helped over 1,000 women, had become a model for similar organizations across the country. Kate and Iris gave speeches, wrote articles, told their stories so other women would know they weren't alone. Silas never sought attention, stayed on his mountain, carved his birds, taught his children and grandchildren, loved his wife with a quiet devotion that never faded. He was 67 when his heart started to fail. The doctor said it was from the war, from gas exposure in France, from 3 decades of carrying trauma he'd never fully processed. He had 2 years, maybe 3 if he was lucky. "I'm not scared," he told Kate on the night they got the diagnosis. "I've lived more in these 30 years with you than most men live in 80. If I died tomorrow, I'd die grateful." "You're not dying tomorrow." Kate's voice was fierce. "You're going to meet your grandchildren, watch Rose graduate medical school, walk Ruth down the aisle. You're going to live because I'm not ready to lose you." She wasn't ready. But ready or not, time was running out. Silas Hawthorne died on a clear morning in September 1961. He was 78 years old, had lived 42 years longer than the doctors in 1919 thought he would, had loved and been loved, had built something lasting. He died in his bed, in the cabin he'd built, with Kate holding his hand. His last words were thank you, not to Kate specifically, to everything, everyone, the universe that had taken so much but given back even more. They buried him next to Abigail, on the hill above the cabin, where he could watch over the valley he'd loved, the family he'd protected, the life he'd chosen over death. Kate lived another 20 years, ran Mountain Haven until she was too old to run anything, then passed it to Iris's daughter, to the next generation of survivors who'd become healers. Rose became a doctor, the first female physician in the Blue Ridge region, treated miners and their families, delivered babies, saved lives, carried on her parents' legacy of service. Ethan took over the cabin, raised his own children there, taught them carpentry and respect for the mountains and the story of how their grandfather had saved their grandmother in a blizzard, how love could grow in the coldest places if you gave it a chance. Ruth and Samuel scattered to cities, but came back for holidays. Always came back, because the cabin was home. Would always be home. Kate died in her sleep in 1981, 90 years old, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She'd outlived Grimm, who died in prison in 1948, outlived most of her enemies and many of her friends. Her last words, whispered to Rose, who sat beside her bed, were simple. Tell them it was worth it. Everything we survived, everything we built. Tell them love is always worth fighting for. They buried her between Silas and Abigail. 3 graves on the hill, 3 lives intertwined across decades. The mountain claimed them all in the end, but their legacy remained. Mountain Haven still operates today. Modern building, professional staff. But the core mission unchanged. Help women who need it. Ask nothing in return. Give them the tools to build new lives. The cabin still stands, maintained by Ethan's children. A historical site now. People visit, read the plaques, learn about Silas and Kate, about the winter of 1919 when a woman collapsed in the snow and a lonely man chose to save her, about how that single choice changed everything. On the plaques by the door, the final words are simple. Sometimes the person you save is the person who saves you. Sometimes home isn't a place. It's a choice, a commitment, a promise kept through hardship and joy. This cabin stands as testament to that truth. May all who enter find the courage to keep their own promises, to choose love over fear, to open their doors to those in need. Because you never know. The stranger freezing on your doorstep might be the answer to a prayer you forgot you prayed, might be the future you thought you'd lost, might be everything you needed but were too afraid to hope for. Silas Hawthorne learned that lesson in the winter of 1919, and he spent the rest of his life grateful he did. The end.